A wealthy man compensated a homeless woman to bear him a child. Upon the arrival of the newborn, a heart-wrenching wail echoed, revealing the profound sorrow of the moment. The subsequent events are even more astonishing. Join us on this journey by subscribing to the channel, and remember to give a thumbs up to keep receiving more captivating tales like this one. Enrique sat in his office, enveloped by a sea of papers and contracts, gazing out at the panoramic view of the city he had triumphantly shaped through his hard work. In the midst of grandeur, an emptiness lingered. The enterprise thrived, the financial ventures yielded returns, yet an emptiness lingered in his existence that none of these successes could satisfy. He gazed at his reflection in the window, searching for answers within his own eyes, yet he found nothing. The separation from Julia, his former spouse, had etched a lasting impression on his heart that he found impossible to remove. Although the relationship had already fractured by the time they chose to part ways, the anguish of the breakup continued to burden him. Julia was his great love, his life partner, and even though their relationship concluded in bitterness, he could never shake the feeling of longing for someone to share his life with. The house, the job, the achievements, all felt hollow when darkness fell, and silence filled the voids once occupied by laughter and chatter. What pained him the most was the inability to provide her with what she desired above all, a child. Marina, his friend and legal advisor, sensed this emptiness, perhaps even before he did. He understood her deeply, aware of her thought processes, always reasoning and analyzing the best choices. Yet, this particular subject appeared to obscure his clarity, ensnaring him in a rigid notion. As the days passed, Marina observed the transformation within him. Enrique started to express his thoughts with conviction regarding a new endeavor, one that he had chosen independently, without considering the potential consequences it might entail. Enrique, Marina said to him one day, her expression serious as she went over some documents. This isn't what you require, you understand that. A child does not fill the void within you, nor will it lead you to discover what you lack inside yourself. Enrique gazed at her, his expression blank, yet the choice he had made shone through in his eyes. You simply don't get it, Marina. I've reflected deeply on my life, my legacy, and all that I've created. I seek a successor, a person to carry on the legacy I have begun. Marina let out a deep sigh, feeling certain that altering his perspective would prove to be a challenging endeavor, at least for now. He understood that he couldn't prevent Enrique from acting impulsively, yet he made every effort to intervene, driven by genuine concern. Enrique, it doesn't need to be this way. The choice you are about to make may carry implications far more significant than you realize. It's essential to take a moment to reflect on the true motivations behind your desires, yet he had already tuned out. I was certain about my intentions. He sought subtle options, as he consistently did when something held great significance for him. Nothing could hinder his determination to embrace fatherhood, to create a family, regardless of the journey it entailed, even if it was out of the ordinary. Through the relationships he had nurtured over the years, he discovered Larissa, a young woman residing on the streets, a girl who had slipped into poverty, yet still held a glimmer of hope in her eyes. She, much like countless others, carried a narrative within her, yet Larissa mastered the art of concealment, navigating the challenges that life had thrust upon her. Enrique discovered her via a mutual connection who assured him that she would be the ideal choice for his requirements. Upon their encounter, Larissa presented herself as a mystery. Though her appearance was disheveled, there was an undeniable quality about her that captured Enrique's attention. Her words flowed like a river, carrying with them the weight of her dreams and desires. She shared the journey that led her to this moment, and in his heart, a spark ignited, a blend of compassion and an urge to mend what he perceived as a challenge. Larissa found it easy to say yes to Enrique's proposal. For a substantial sum, she would agree to fulfill the role of the mother for the child he desired. Somehow, Marina's words lingered in Enrique's mind. What she viewed as an error, he perceived as the sole remedy for his solitude and his prospects. Marina, though unsettled by Enrique's choice, could only observe as the businessman affixed his signature to the agreement with Larissa, marking the beginning of an unpredictable journey for them both. Enrique's unwavering resolve, his desire to create a lasting impact, was impervious to any obstacle, even logic itself. Larissa's life, distinct from Enrique's, began to shift in unforeseen ways. As they both ventured along parallel journeys, each unique yet intertwined by a common fate, neither was aware of the consequences that this choice would bring to their lives. Enrique's longing for an heir might prove to be far more intricate than he ever anticipated, while Larissa, unaware, was on the brink of a journey that would alter her fate eternally. Larissa strolled through the streets, her head lowered, the chill of the afternoon seeping into her very bones. She wished to remain unseen, to evade any recognition from others. In her hands, the envelope from Enrique held the agreement that had woven itself into her life, yet it was not the reason she hurried, sidestepping curious gazes. He faced a choice, and an unsettling feeling stirred within him, resisting each move he contemplated, yet the choice had already been settled. I found it necessary to take that action. Their survival was on the line, as was their future. He had endured countless nights on the streets, resting on benches, struggling for food, so that anything felt like an improvement over that existence. And there he stood, confronting the truth that his life had veered off in a direction he had never envisioned. Enrique had extended a hand to her, providing what she sought, yet Larissa found herself pondering the motives lurking beneath the businessman's kindness. He understood that every choice carried a cost, and for him, that cost bore a far heavier burden than it appeared. Amidst the chaos of her mind, Larissa suddenly recalled Ricardo. He had been her partner, her ally during those bleak times in her life, when the streets were her refuge and the days seemed to stretch into eternity. Even though their relationship had concluded poorly, an undeniable connection lingered between them, a thread that bound her to him. Ricardo had always possessed a knack for bending circumstances to his will, expertly navigating his desires, and Larissa had found herself ensnared in his schemes on multiple occasions. Yet, an inner turmoil, a blend of urgency and shattered faith, compelled her to find him. He stepped into the cafe where they often gathered. The establishment was devoid of patrons, save for the waiter diligently tending to the counter. Ricardo stood in a corner, fixated on his phone, as though he were anticipating something significant. Larissa had always felt the impact of his presence. Upon seeing him, her entire being stirred, as if remnants of the past lingered, reminding her of the times he made her feel valued, unique. Yet, that sensation swiftly diminished as he lifted his gaze and caught sight of her. Larissa. Ricardo regarded her with a lopsided grin, a grin that had always carried a hint of arrogance. What brings you here? It was a surprise to encounter you once more. I would like to have a conversation with you. Larissa took a seat without waiting for him to gesture, a move that felt all too familiar to her. I have something important to share with you. Ricardo regarded her with a keen interest, as though he were assessing the value of her forthcoming words. His tone shifted instantly, transforming from apathetic to engaged. What is the subject matter? He inquired, maintaining his distance, yet his gaze remained fixed on her. Enrique presented me with a proposition. Larissa's voice trembled, yet she endeavored to keep her poise. He will compensate me to conceive, to become the mother of his offspring. Ricardo couldn't suppress a soft chuckle. He inclined his body closer to her, his expression taking on a more solemn demeanor. So, you went ahead and accepted? His voice carried a clear sense of disbelief, yet there was an intriguing glimmer in his eyes. Larissa nodded, her gaze fixed on the ground, as if searching for the perfect words to articulate her choice. Indeed, he responded in a voice barely above a whisper. This is an opportunity one simply cannot let slip away. I will find a way to leave the streets behind and embrace a life of dignity. Ricardo observed her quietly for a brief period, assessing the circumstances. At last, a spark ignited in his eyes, and a contented grin spread across his face. You're fortunate, Larissa, he remarked, his tone dripping with icy assurance. However, if you choose to proceed, there is a more effective approach to leverage all of this. Larissa gazed at him, a look of bewilderment crossing her face. I was taken aback by how straightforward his words were, so. Unprincipled. What do you propose? He inquired, his voice thick with emotion. Ricardo reclined in his chair, legs crossed in a casual pose, yet his eyes held a sharper focus, assessing everything around him. Let's enhance our profits, he remarked, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. You will find yourself expecting, but he won't be the one responsible. Conceive with another man, and then we can request additional funds from him, claiming he violated the agreement. The ensuing silence was thick and palpable. Larissa gazed at him, her mind grappling with the implications of Ricardo's suggestion. His mind was a chaotic whirlwind of clashing thoughts. What Ricardo said stirred within her a blend of trepidation and intrigue. Is it possible for me to accomplish this? Could it truly be so simple to trick Enrique and secure additional funds? I'm uncertain, Ricardo. His voice trembled. This seems quite perilous. What if he discovers the reality? What if it turns perilous? Ricardo made his way toward her. His tone became gentler, yet his gaze remained resolute. Listen, Larissa, he said, his voice low and resolute. This is your moment, the sole opportunity you will get to move on from all of this. Enrique is a relentless force, unwavering in his pursuits. However, you have the ability to utilize it. Make it happen for yourself, for what lies ahead. Larissa experienced an increasing weight in her chest, yet the thought of a life free from concerns, of escaping hardship, drew her in powerfully. What remained for him if he chose not to accept? He understood that his life would remain stagnant, lacking transformation, unless he embraced a strategy akin to the one Ricardo presented to him. What happens if it doesn't work out? He inquired, yet he was already aware of the response. Everything stays on track when you're in charge, Ricardo replied, a smile returning to his face, as though victory was already his. Everything hinges on the way you approach it. Believe in me. Larissa swallowed hard, her gaze fixed on Ricardo, acutely aware of the gravity of her choice in each syllable that escaped his lips. He understood he was stepping over a boundary, one that offered no return, yet the allure of a brighter future, a future free from the pain he had endured, appeared to validate his impending actions. Are you doing well? He finally spoke, his voice more resolute. I shall proceed with that. Ricardo gave her a reassuring pat on the back, as though he had already secured his success, then leaned in closer, his expression brimming with shadowy intentions. That's precisely what I wanted to hear, he remarked, and the sparkle in his eyes revealed that, for him, this was merely a game he was determined to conquer, regardless of the collateral damage he might cause in the process. Larissa departed the café, her heart heavy with a mix of emotions. The choice was set, and even as her inner voice softly urged her that something felt amiss, the allure of Ricardo's assurances and the vision of the life she had always longed for propelled her forward into an unpredictable tomorrow. Marina dedicated several hours to meticulously examining the contract, ensuring that every clause was transparent and safeguarded Enrique's interests. As he proceeded, he pondered the implications of the situation, reflecting on what this agreement signified not just for Enrique, but for Larissa too. She realized that the document before her was more than mere legal jargon, it was a commitment that would alter the course of many lives. Yet, in the end, Marina accepted that she had no power to prevent it. Enrique had reached his conclusion, and now she could only ensure that all legal aspects were addressed. The contract was thorough, nearly precise. It was determined that Larissa would be compensated handsomely for her involvement, and that upon birth, the baby would be granted sole custody to Enrique. Marina had been explicit in her commitment to safeguarding Enrique's rights. Any effort by Larissa to alter the agreement would constitute a breach, leading to the forfeiture of all that has been settled. Enrique experienced a sense of tranquility upon reviewing the contract, confident that every detail was addressed. Life, ultimately, was a transaction, and this agreement appeared to be the most advantageous for their future. Larissa, for her part, feigned contentment with everything. The young woman signed the document with a detached air, her thoughts occupied by a myriad of other worries. Each word of the contract pressed heavily upon her, yet the promise of financial relief and the chance to escape her life of struggle kept her spirits buoyed. His mind was focused solely on the immediate rewards, oblivious to the potential consequences that lay ahead. Having finalized the contract, Larissa settled into the apartment that Enrique had arranged for her. The space was expansive and filled with light, adorned with contemporary and opulent decor. All that Larissa had ever envisioned was present. Expanse, ease, tranquility. Yet, in the midst of the joy that all this brought her, there lingered a restlessness within that prevented her from finding peace. She understood the risks she was taking, aware that her moves were not completely above board, yet the allure of a life without worries fueled her determination to succeed. On her inaugural day in the apartment, Enrique stopped by to ensure she was comfortably settled. He welcomed her with a grin, his expression revealing a blend of eagerness and apprehension. After what felt like an eternity of anticipation, the moment had arrived, and at last, everything began to crystallize. "What are your thoughts on how you feel?" Enrique inquired, scanning the apartment with curiosity. "Is everything okay? Is there something you're longing for?" Larissa offered him a strained smile, still struggling to adapt to the opulence that enveloped her. "Yes, everything is perfect," she remarked while adjusting herself on the couch, feeling a touch uneasy. "I truly appreciate everything, Enrique, it has exceeded my expectations in every way." He nodded, yet his expression conveyed a depth beyond mere satisfaction. His enthusiasm for the prospect of fatherhood was unmistakable, a fact that Larissa increasingly observed in the way he spoke about their future child, as if the little one already existed, as if a bond had already formed between them. It was clear that Enrique was becoming increasingly invested in the notion of fatherhood, which only heightened her feelings of insecurity regarding the entire situation. Yet, I found it necessary to forge ahead. There was no way to go back. "I'm truly pleased you agreed to this arrangement, Larissa," he remarked as he took a seat across from her. "This holds great significance for me, not just due to the baby, but also because of what it symbolizes. An exciting prospect awaits." Larissa nodded, absorbing the gravity of his words. I was at a loss for how to respond. A part of her yearned to perceive in Enrique a true man, one who genuinely desired to embrace fatherhood, yet another part recognized that she was entangled in a game devoid of emotions, where only the execution of a deal mattered. In the days that followed, Enrique's enthusiasm grew even stronger. He started to assert his presence at her doctor's appointments, behaving as though he were a committed father, deeply engaged in every detail of the pregnancy. Larissa allowed him to proceed. I was hesitant to disturb his peace, yet I also felt the need to maintain my distance from his reality. Everything felt like it was rushing by. During one of the consultations, as the doctor conducted the initial routine examinations, Enrique's emotions were palpable. I examined each detail closely. He gazed at the monitor, yearning to catch a glimpse of his future son, seeking reassurance that all was unfolding as it should. Meanwhile, Larissa remained quiet, observing him as he jotted down notes. He inquired about every minor detail, as if he were attending a workshop on child rearing. "Is everything all right, doctor?" Enrique inquired, his tone laden with worry. The physician offered a warm smile and gave a reassuring nod. "Indeed, all is in order. The pregnancy is still in its early days, yet all appears to be progressing smoothly. The well-being of the mother is paramount, and Larissa is doing well." Larissa felt the weight of Enrique's gaze, locked onto her, particularly her abdomen, as if he sought to uncover the deeper truths hidden beneath the surface. The look on his face was surprisingly gentle, as if he truly believed that everything unfolding was exactly what he had always wished for. Upon exiting the consultation, Enrique was filled with euphoria. He showed an unprecedented level of attentiveness, inquiring about the specifics of how Larissa could best manage her health. He appeared to be constructing a world of his own, one that he governed, while Larissa was merely an ornament, a tool for his ambitions. "Larissa, I need you to really consider everything I'm saying," he said as he escorted her back to the apartment. "This child will be my enduring mark on the world. Life without him is beyond my comprehension." Enrique's words lingered in the atmosphere as Larissa gazed at him. She sensed the burden of his expectations pressing down on her, fully aware that this was merely a piece of a grander scheme, one that lacked affection and was driven solely by practicality. That evening, as Larissa sat in solitude within her apartment, she reflected on all that had transpired leading up to that point. He sensed that Enrique was growing attached to the notion of fatherhood, and an undeniable guilt washed over him. Not due to infidelity, but rather because she was unaware of the extent to which her choice would impact everything around her. The existence she had envisioned for herself, a life free from hardship and relentless pain, was within reach like never before. As events progressed, Larissa sensed that the fragments of the puzzle were aligning in an unexpected manner. She glimpsed the future, yet uncertainty lingered about her role within it. As Enrique increasingly grasped onto the fantasy of fatherhood, Larissa recognized that he was merely acting in a narrative that did not belong to him. Increasingly, the contract he had entered into was starting to resemble a snare. Yet, the moment for retreat had passed. Marina was someone who never overlooked the finer points, her keen eye for detail had always set her apart. At times, that left her feeling uneasy around others. As Enrique appeared lost in his fantasy of fatherhood, she couldn't shake off the subtle discrepancies that caught her attention. Larissa had an enigmatic quality, an element that felt out of place. From the outset, Marina had a nagging feeling that the arrangement between Enrique and Larissa was far more complicated than it appeared. He was aware that Larissa carried the weight of a questionable history, yet now he found himself questioning the genuine motives of the young woman. Larissa steered clear of any physical contact with Enrique, a detail that appeared trivial in his eyes. In his enthusiasm, he pressed on with his aspirations to become the father he had always envisioned. Yet, Marina couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. Whenever Enrique attempted to express his feelings, Larissa would subtly distance herself, as though the closeness unsettled her. At times, her responses grew elusive, and when he broached the subject of their future together, she offered a strained smile. Marina, with her sharp eye, could not overlook those subtle nuances. There was an unmistakable hint in Larissa's demeanor that suggested all was not as flawless as Enrique wished to perceive. One afternoon, following a meeting with Enrique, Marina chose to visit Larissa's apartment. Though lacking evidence, his instincts urged him to draw nearer to the unfolding events. It appeared that the young woman was solitary when Marina rapped on the door. "Hello, Larissa," Marina said with a warm smile, though her gaze was keenly assessing the young woman. "Marina, what an unexpected delight." Larissa attempted to mask her unease, yet her efforts were awkward, revealing her uncertainty about her acceptance. "I stopped by to check on you, to make sure all is well." Marina stepped in uninvited. "How do you feel?" Larissa managed a smile, encouraging her to take a seat. "These visits were unfamiliar to me." She felt uneasy under the gaze of others, yet she understood there was little she could change about the situation. As Marina started to share her thoughts on the progress of her pregnancy, Larissa adopted a detached demeanor, which piqued the lawyer's interest. "I've observed that you seem to struggle with being close to Enrique." Marina allowed the words to linger in the air, both soft and direct. Larissa regarded her with astonishment, yet she concealed her unease. He attempted to respond as usual, yet an unsettling feeling stirred within him. "It's not that, Marina, I just have this odd feeling. Everything feels so unfamiliar," he remarked, fidgeting with his hands in a nervous manner. Marina took in Larissa's every movement, each utterance. He sensed that something was amiss, yet he lacked evidence, relying solely on his intuition, which hinted at deeper complexities at play. "Larissa, Enrique is absolutely thrilled. I sense that you're not approaching this with the casualness it appears to have." Marina felt compelled to voice it. He seemed torn, yearning to face the young woman, yet apprehensive about the truths that might unfold. Larissa felt a brief surge of tension, but soon found her calm. She understood the importance of keeping her true self hidden from Marina. "I can't help but feel anxious about the baby, about all that's unfolding around us. I believe I'm experiencing some pressure." he remarked, attempting to rationalize his actions. Marina gazed at her, taking in the nuances of her expression and the subtleties of her posture. It crossed my mind that Larissa might not be telling the whole truth, or perhaps concealing something beneath the surface. The dialogue wrapped up quickly, and Marina bid farewell without pausing to reflect on all that she had sensed. In the meantime, Ricardo remained acutely attuned to each movement Larissa made. Ever since he resumed following her, he understood that the situation was unsustainable, that Larissa had to come through for him. He had poured so much into this plan that it couldn't possibly unravel because of uncertainty and indecision. Ricardo had always toyed with Larissa's thoughts, and now that she appeared to waver, he couldn't allow everything to slip through his fingers. One afternoon, as Larissa exited the supermarket, Ricardo approached her, his smile a mere facade that couldn't conceal the underlying tension between them. "What troubles you, Larissa?" Ricardo stated, gripping her arm firmly, leaving no space for her to respond. "You haven't followed through on any of our discussions. Please proceed with the plan. Enrique must remain unaware, and your actions are revealing too much." Larissa struggled to break free from his hold, but he remained unyielding. Her gaze was unwavering, and despite her efforts to stay composed, the fear that Ricardo evoked in her was inescapable. He understood that his choice to engage in this game was significant, yet he remained oblivious to the lengths to which Ricardo might go. "Ricardo, I can't go on with this," Larissa said, her voice quivering. "I am not feeling my best. I'm uncertain whether our actions are truly the best course of action." Ricardo regarded her with disdain, his smile vanishing entirely. He understood that Larissa was succumbing to her fears, yet he couldn't permit that to happen. "You have no choice, Larissa," he said with an icy tone, tightening his grip on her arm further. "This is the sole thing you need to escape from your current situation. If you stop now, everything will unravel, and you will bear the responsibility for our losses. Enrique is far from foolish, and if we allow him to catch a whiff of anything amiss, we risk losing everything we've labored to achieve. Do you comprehend my thoughts?" Larissa gazed at him, her eyes brimming with doubt. Deep down, I understood that Ricardo was correct. She found herself unable to retreat, yet the burden of remorse was gradually engulfing her, leading her to question whether this pursuit was truly worth the effort to maintain. The existence that Ricardo assured her felt more like an enchantment than a genuine remedy. "I will," he finally said with a resigned sigh, as though he had come to terms with his inevitable fate. Ricardo beamed, pleased with the response. He understood that Larissa had no other way out. She found herself ensnared in her own creation, and he was determined to ensure her escape was impossible. Meanwhile, Enrique pressed on with his life, increasingly embracing the notion of fatherhood. Her enthusiasm intensified with every medical consultation, with each piece of good news regarding Larissa's pregnancy. I was completely unaware of the true situation unfolding around me. To him, everything appeared flawless. Whenever he gazed at her, he envisioned the mother of his child, the woman who had bestowed upon him the future he had always longed for. Yet, unbeknownst to him, beneath Larissa's exterior lay a tempest of deceit and cunning that jeopardized all he believed he had mastered. Larissa ultimately made the choice to move forward. Weeks had passed with the deception quietly brewing, and now, burdened by a gut full of doubt and the heavy toll of his choice, he found himself unable to delay any further. She positioned herself opposite Enrique in the opulent living room of his apartment, the very one he had secured for her. The afternoon light streamed through the curtains, enveloping the room in a gentle glow. Enrique sat across from her, cradling a cup of coffee, the television murmuring softly behind him, yet his gaze was entirely locked onto her. "Enrique, there's something I need to share with you." Larissa's voice carried a hint of uncertainty, a detail that he picked up on immediately. He arched an eyebrow in her direction, yet remained silent. The tranquility he had embraced recently only served to highlight the emotions he had kept hidden. He sensed the revelation she was poised to share, yet deep down, he yearned for it to be genuine. "I am expecting a baby." Larissa finally released the words, as though they had been trapped in her throat, fighting to escape. Enrique observed her quietly, in a moment that stretched on indefinitely. A sudden look of astonishment appeared on his face, quickly replaced by a broad, radiant smile. The atmosphere in the room shifted, becoming more buoyant, filled with a sense of optimism. In an instant, everything in the universe appeared to align perfectly. "That's incredible," he exclaimed, setting the cup down on the table with a thud that resonated in the quiet of the room. He rose without hesitation and moved toward her, every gesture infused with feeling. "Do you really believe that?" Larissa nodded, a faint smile tugging at her lips, yet beneath the surface, her thoughts churned with the implications of this news. Enrique was oblivious to the true nature of the situation unfolding around him. His joy was authentic, yet rooted in a meticulously crafted deception. "Yes, I'm certain," Larissa affirmed, a heaviness settling in her chest. "The results have revealed that I am going to have a baby." Enrique embraced her with a fervor that suggested he could envision the unfolding of their future with vivid clarity. In his thoughts, he envisioned himself as the proud father, nurturing his son and witnessing his growth. All that he had desired was coming to fruition. "This is what I've always dreamed of," he murmured, embracing her tightly. "I will be an exceptional father, I assure you. This little one will possess all that is necessary." In that instant, Larissa experienced a sharp twinge of guilt, yet she swiftly dismissed it. She understood that, despite all the flaws in this situation, the life Enrique presented to her was far superior to anything she had experienced in the past. It was alluring. He recognized the benefits of going with the flow, of maintaining momentum, of avoiding any glances backward. The days that followed were an emotional whirlwind for Enrique. Her enthusiasm radiated, yet for Larissa, everything felt like it was whirling out of control. Enrique started to intensify his attentiveness towards her. They brought her to the doctor, even though she had ceased adhering to Ricardo's guidance on managing the situation. Enrique was fully engaged, believing wholeheartedly that he was providing the finest care a father could offer to his child. Larissa, on her end, was starting to sense that the weight of being the focal point of this game was becoming overwhelming. Even though the allure of material gains was tempting, the burden of deception and the future being constructed upon it left her feeling uneasy. I understood that I must persevere. Yet the guilt was starting to permeate his very essence. Yet, Ricardo's voice lingered, insisting that he persist in his performance, that he keep influencing Enrique, that he seek further gains. One afternoon, following a medical consultation where Enrique inquired about every minute detail, Larissa received a message from Ricardo. The text displayed before her intensified the weight of expectation she felt. It's time to begin maximizing its potential. Request what you require from him. Do it for yourself and for the future of your child. There's no going back at this point. Larissa gazed at the message, her emotions swirling with unease and irritation. He had sensed it from the very start. This transcended the roles of motherhood and family. Ricardo yearned for something greater, while she found herself ensnared in the intricate web he had spun. As Ricardo's voice persisted, Enrique's unwavering affection complicated the progress of the plan he had carefully crafted. That evening, once Enrique had settled into bed, Larissa lingered in the living room, her gaze fixed on her cell phone. She understood the necessity of speaking with him, the need to request more, as Ricardo had advised her, yet a fragment of her was filled with uncertainty. Did she truly wish to persist in influencing a man who, despite his flaws, appeared to be sincerely enamored with the notion of fatherhood? The following day, Enrique accompanied her to a fresh doctor's appointment. As they sat in the exam room, he continued to share his aspirations for the baby. He started to envision grand possibilities, acquiring luxurious furnishings for the child's room and enlisting top-notch nurses and caregivers to guarantee that Larissa received all the care she deserved. Each word he spoke was a vow of a radiant tomorrow, a tomorrow that appeared to be just at his fingertips. I will ensure that everything is just right for our son. Enrique said with a radiant smile, I don't care what Larissa costs, I will do everything for him. Larissa experienced her existence as though she were merely observing from the sidelines. She sensed herself being carried along by an unstoppable tide, and to her dismay, she had started to find solace in the embrace of this unfamiliar realm. Yet beneath the surface, a turmoil was unraveling her from within. He understood that he could no longer sustain this deception, yet he was acutely aware that retreating was not an option. With each passing day, Ricardo's expectations grew ever higher. He desired Larissa to ensure that Enrique's commitment exceeded its current bounds, to request additional funds, more lavish gifts, and further promises, until he found himself so entangled in the intricate web they had spun that escape would be impossible. Ricardo yearned for everything, and Larissa, though hesitant, was starting to embrace it as well. In that instant, as the manipulation started to feel almost instinctive, and Ricardo's words lost their initial repugnance, Larissa made the choice to comply with his request. As the evening unfolded in a serene atmosphere, with Enrique pouring her a glass of wine and discussing their aspirations for the baby, Larissa seized her moment. "Enrique, there's one more thing I'd like to request from you," he said, inhaling deeply. "Given all that you're doing for me and the baby, I believe I deserve a bit more stability. It would be great if you could assist me in ensuring our son's future, perhaps by raising the amount we previously discussed." Enrique gazed at her in astonishment, yet simultaneously, his expression brightened with the sense that he was meeting all her needs. "Absolutely, Larissa, whatever you require, our son deserves nothing but the best," he replied instantly, firmly believing that all his actions stemmed from love and a vision for the future. Larissa sensed she had ventured further into this perilous game, yet in that instant, she couldn't ignore the emerging rewards of her decision. As Enrique elaborated on his ambitions, Larissa drifted into contemplation, pondering whether she could escape this situation without sacrificing it all. Marina was plagued by an unsettling sense that something was amiss. While Enrique was utterly committed to the notion of fatherhood and overwhelmed by his enthusiasm, she sensed there was something she needed to uncover. He found it impossible to overlook the subtle hints in Larissa's demeanor, her reluctance to engage, her aloofness. "I realized there was no way I could halt my pursuit of the truth." A feeling stirred within him, suggesting that the narrative held deeper layers than what was immediately apparent. As the days passed, Marina delved into Larissa's history, exploring public records, social media, and every possible source that might provide her with insights. Though it posed challenges, Marina possessed the skill to accomplish it. Throughout her career, she had accumulated sufficient expertise as a lawyer to uncover any detail that could be pertinent, regardless of the efforts made by the individual to conceal it. The initial hint emerged when, via a connection, he successfully uncovered a news piece that referenced Larissa in a local report concerning missing individuals. The report indicated that the young woman had spent years living on the streets and had been spotted in various cities, occasionally begging or taking on informal work. Yet, what captivated Marina's interest the most was a mention of a man named Ricardo, who had been associated with her on multiple occasions. As Marina reflected on the name Ricardo, which Larissa had mentioned in passing, she sensed that the pieces of the puzzle were beginning to align perfectly. He resolved to delve further. He realized this man was far from ordinary, and as he uncovered more details about him, the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Ricardo, as Marina had anticipated, was far from an ordinary man. He revealed himself to be a notorious con artist, entangled in a web of deceitful schemes throughout the years. He had faced arrest multiple times due to his unlawful endeavors, yet he consistently managed to slip through the grasp of the law. He cultivated a web of connections where deceit and cunning were the foundation of his achievements. The bond between him and Larissa was unmistakably clear. He had not only encountered her during her time on the streets, but had also played a role in some of her previous schemes. Marina was astounded by the revelations unfolding before her. It baffled me that Enrique, so intent on the notion of fatherhood, had not delved deeper into Larissa's background, her history. Nevertheless, he understood that he couldn't simply overlook this information. The moment had arrived to engage him in conversation, despite my awareness of the challenges that lay ahead. He resolved that the time for waiting had passed, and it was time to take action. One afternoon, he reached out to her over the phone to arrange a meeting in his office. Enrique remained oblivious, while Marina resolved that revealing everything was the most prudent course of action. As Enrique stepped into his office, he immediately observed the gravity etched on Marina's features. "What seems to be the matter, Marina?" he inquired with concern. "Everything all right?" Marina gazed at him, her mind racing as she sought the perfect expression. She understood that her words had the power to shatter her carefully constructed reality, yet she felt compelled to share them. "Enrique, I require your full attention," he finally stated. "I've been looking into Larissa." Enrique frowned, clearly displeased with the information being shared. "What is that? Why?" He appeared clearly uneasy. "What prompted your inquiry into Larissa?" "There are aspects of his history that you ought to be aware of before proceeding with your intentions." Marina spoke with a serene demeanor, yet her voice conveyed the weight of her message, indicating it was far from inconsequential. "Larissa is not the person she claims to be. Her past is filled with shadows, and she shares a deep connection with Ricardo, the man who frequently occupies her conversations." Enrique gazed at her, a mix of confusion and curiosity etched across his face, struggling to grasp the situation. "I don't understand," he said, but Marina had already laid out the documents she had collected, arranging them meticulously on the table. "Ricardo is far from an ordinary man," Marina continued, gesturing towards the papers. "He is a fraud, a wrongdoer. He has participated in various fraudulent activities throughout the years. Larissa not only encountered him on the street, but she also became involved in several of his schemes. Their relationship was far more intricate than one might think." Enrique stayed quiet, his gaze fixed on the documents. Every word from Marina struck him with increasing intensity, leaving him at a loss for how to comprehend all that he was absorbing. "It was beyond my comprehension. Larissa had earned his complete trust, becoming the woman he envisioned as the mother of his son, his heir, and now, all of that was unraveling. "It can't be," he whispered, his fingers brushing against his face, as if seeking to untangle the chaos in his mind. This doesn't make sense. "Enrique, I understand this is difficult to accept, but you must confront the reality," Marina stated with conviction. "Larissa is not present for affection nor for the kindness of her spirit. He is engaged in a game. From the very start, she and Ricardo have orchestrated this." Enrique remained quiet, absorbing all that Marina had conveyed. "I sensed an oddity, a dissonance that lingered just out of reach, yet I was reluctant to confront the truth." His heart whispered assurances that all was well, that Larissa held love for him, that she represented his future, his enduring mark on the world. Confronted with the reality, he found himself engulfed in a sense of betrayal. "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" he inquired, sensing that the trust he had invested in Marina was beginning to fracture. "Why didn't you share this with me earlier?" Marina let out a deep breath, burdened by her mounting frustration. He understood that Enrique was overwhelmed by his feelings, yet he couldn't allow their friendship and the truth to be sidelined. "I knew you wouldn't pay attention," he responded. "But now that you have proof, you can no longer turn a blind eye." A surge of anger welled up in Enrique's chest. A blend of fury and disillusionment that enveloped him entirely. In an instant, everything he envisioned about Larissa, the depth of his affection for her, shattered right before him. What he believed to be an opportunity for joy and parenthood turned out to be a meticulously crafted deception. "What should I do now?" he inquired, his voice trembling with exasperation. "How can I trust her after everything that's happened?" Marina gazed at him, noticing the anguish reflected in his eyes. He understood the challenge ahead, yet it was evident that Enrique needed to confront the truth, regardless of its difficulty. "That's what you need to figure out," Marina said, her voice tinged with both sorrow and empathy. "What I have revealed to you today is merely the start. Should you choose to proceed with Larissa, it will be entirely on your own terms. However, I urge you to remain grounded and not let your desires cloud your judgment." Enrique remained motionless, his gaze fixed on the documents laid out before him. His thoughts, clouded by uncertainty and bewilderment, struggled to grasp the unfolding events. All he could grasp was the undeniable truth that everything had shifted, and the future he once envisioned with Larissa now felt like a shattered illusion. Enrique found himself grappling with the unfolding events, unable to grasp their true nature. Since Larissa announced her pregnancy, her life had completely transformed. With each stride, he sensed that everything was coming into focus. He envisioned himself as the ideal father, living in the perfect home, alongside the woman who would bless him with the son he longed for. Yet, the minor discrepancies he had observed in Larissa were beginning to accumulate, the aloof demeanor, the reluctance to engage, the incomplete answers, but he continued to hold on to the belief that everything would turn out flawlessly. On a Wednesday afternoon, Larissa started to put forth her initial requests. The dining room was where they found themselves. Larissa had set the table for a modest dinner, yet it was evident that her intentions extended beyond the meal itself. "Enrique, there's something important we need to talk about," Larissa said, averting her eyes as she took a seat across from him, her voice carrying a weight of seriousness. He gazed at her, unable to conceal his intrigue. He found the tone unsettling, yet he placed his trust in her, hoping it was related to the baby. "Absolutely, Larissa. What's going on?" he remarked, sensing his heart starting to race, driven by an odd feeling that things were about to unfold differently than anticipated. "I've been contemplating what lies ahead, considering what essentials I'll require for the baby and for myself post-birth." His voice was steady, yet the glimmer in his eyes was unmistakable. "It seems like a great idea to transition to a bigger apartment, one that offers more comfort for the baby and additional space." Enrique gazed at her quietly, uncertain if he should regard her words with gravity or skepticism. Even without a visible expression, her demeanor appeared markedly changed from what it once was. She had always felt a sense of gratitude, even in the current apartment, which he believed was more than sufficient for the two of them. "Larger?" Enrique inquired, caught in a moment of uncertainty between amusement and discomfort. "Yet I have already provided you with a quite cozy spot, Larissa. What's the reason for wanting it larger?" Larissa held her silence, allowing him a moment to absorb her words. At last, he inclined his body slightly, fixing his gaze on Enrique with an earnest demeanor. He started to speak, his voice gentle yet resolute. "I would appreciate having more room for the baby, and considering the current situation, I believe it would be the wisest choice. A location that offers him greater seclusion, better aligned with what lies ahead." Enrique paused, sensing that something was amiss. He couldn't overlook that Larissa had valid motivations for desiring a cozy home for her son, yet her appeal for a bigger apartment felt like it crossed the line into the unreasonable. "I might be able to entertain your request, though this wasn't part of our original agreement," he said, striving to maintain his composure as his thoughts started to align. Larissa, aware that she had not fully swayed him, pressed on with her suggestion. "I've been contemplating the costs associated with the baby and all the essentials I'll require post-delivery. I believe it would be reasonable for you to offer me an extra amount to address those expenses." Her tone had shifted to a more assertive one, as if she firmly believed she was entitled to make the request. "It might serve as a support for the initial months, benefiting not just the baby, but myself as well." Enrique scowled. A flicker of doubt stirred within him, questioning the sense of Larissa's request. The terms of the agreement were unmistakable. He was willing to give her what she sought, yet this demand exceeded the boundaries of their previous conversations. "Additional funds, Larissa?" he remarked, his bewilderment evident. "I've provided plenty. I can't grasp why you require so much more." Larissa reclined in her seat, releasing a sigh as she regarded him with an expression that balanced on the edge of defiance and submission, as if she anticipated his grasp of a sentiment she struggled to articulate. "Enrique, considering all that you've done for me, I believe I can request a bit more. The little one will require numerous essentials. Count me in as well. I've been contemplating the future, considering what I desire for my life and his. I believe some additional assistance would be fitting," she remarked, gazing deeply into his eyes. Enrique observed her quietly, uncertainty starting to seep into his thoughts. Her words seemed logical, yet an undercurrent in her tone suggested there was more beneath the surface of what she was expressing. At that moment, the emotional distance Larissa had kept from the start started to reveal its significance, and a subtle fear began to stir in her stomach. "I'm not sure, Larissa," he replied, a hint of unease creeping in. "I've already provided you with everything you need. An apartment, funds for the baby, access to whatever you desire. This change is perplexing to me." Larissa maintained her focus, her gaze unwavering as it stayed fixed on him. Additionally, Enrique's voice softened, yet retained its firmness. "In my opinion, following childbirth, there ought to be a clear separation. I desire what's best for the baby, yet I also require my own space. I believe we could come to an arrangement where you provide me with a larger sum of money in return for stepping back from the family once the baby arrives." Enrique sensed the atmosphere in the room growing denser. This proposal caught him off guard and appeared to contradict all his previous notions. Did Larissa wish to distance herself from him after he had been so kind to her? Was she seeking something beyond what she had committed to? "Are you suggesting to create some space?" He echoed the words, almost unconsciously, a blend of astonishment and uncertainty in his voice. "Could you clarify what you mean by that? Considering all our discussions, do you wish to depart after the baby arrives?" Larissa shrugged her shoulders, as though the situation were perfectly ordinary. "This isn't a genuine relationship, Enrique. We simply aren't destined to be together. The child is the priority, yet I crave my autonomy. A financial agreement from you would empower me to take charge of my life and shape my future." Enrique paused, absorbing Larissa's words in thoughtful silence. Even with his requests laid out plainly, a nagging sense of inconsistency lingered in his mind. Why at this moment, when it appeared that everything was unfolding just right? All his aspirations were disintegrating piece by piece, and he found himself unable to shake off the thoughts of the repercussions that came with naively pursuing this endeavor. "I have provided you with all that you require, Larissa. What prompts you to seek additional?" he inquired with a voice that trembled under pressure. "What is it that you truly seek from me?" Larissa remained silent, her gaze fixed on him, a serene expression evident on her features. He was fully aware of his actions. Each word, each plea, was crafted to ensure that Enrique relied on her more than he realized, yet beneath the surface, she sensed an underlying force at work, something beyond her grasp. "I simply desire a future for myself and for the baby," his voice soft and nearly devoid of emotion replied. "I believe this is the most beneficial choice for all involved." Enrique gazed at her, his mind swirling with confusion. His intuition had become unreliable. Larissa's actions seemed to create distance between them, leaving him uncertain whether it was his own blindness to the truth or if she was indeed claiming more than her fair share. What he understood was that he could no longer dismiss the unsettling feeling that something was amiss, and that all his dreams for the future were teetering on the brink of collapse. Enrique found himself taken aback by the unexpected message. Though her life brimmed with unexpected twists, this was one I had not foreseen. Julia, his former spouse, had resurfaced in his life after quite a while. The relationship with her had concluded in a challenging manner, yet, in spite of it all, there remained a part of him that he could never fully sever. The feelings he experienced for her, for the moments they had together, lingered on, never fully fading away. The feelings he had for her, for the moments they had experienced together, lingered on, never fully fading away. The note conveyed her desire to meet him, expressing an urgent need for a conversation. It was a demand he couldn't overlook. Since the divorce, their encounters had become infrequent, and the sudden desire for conversation from her stirred a sense of unease within him. Yet, simultaneously, his curiosity drove him to agree. They encountered each other at a quaint coffee shop, an unassuming spot. Julia was the first to arrive, embodying her usual grace and poise, just as she always had. Upon seeing her, Enrique was flooded with memories of their time together, reflecting on the years they spent filled with dreams and hopes. At this moment, only the faint resonance of those memories lingered. She smiled at him upon seeing him, yet that smile carried a different weight, one that was more mature and contemplative, as if she had grasped insights that he had yet to comprehend. Enrique. His voice carried a comforting warmth, yet there was an underlying trace of weariness. It feels like ages since we last crossed paths. Enrique nodded, feeling uncertain about how to initiate the dialogue. Regardless of all that transpired between them, his admiration for her remained unwavering. Even though her marriage concluded with a heart-wrenching separation, there was an undeniable quality in her stride through life that lingered with him, evoking a sense that their connection had not entirely reached its conclusion. Indeed, quite a while has passed. How have you been? He inquired, fully aware that the question held no hope of a meaningful answer. Both were acutely aware that life had not been simple for them since the split. I'm doing okay, all things considered, she replied, taking a sip of her coffee. I've been occupied, but I caught wind of the laughter, she remarked, glancing at Enrique, a hint of worry flickering in her gaze. Are you truly planning to have a child with her? Julia's inquiry was anticipated, yet it sent a wave of tension through Enrique's gut. I anticipated this moment, yet I found myself unready to face it. He paused, caught in a moment of uncertainty, unsure of how to respond. Indeed, it appears that everything is moving at a rapid pace, but that's precisely what I desire. He finally replied, a blend of pride and uncertainty evident in his tone. This is my lifelong aspiration. Julia gazed at him, her expression a mix of curiosity and contemplation, as if she were unraveling the meaning behind his words. It was evident that he sought a deeper meaning in his reply, an essence that eluded my perception. Yet, just as he was about to proceed, she hesitated, seemingly weighing the decision to disclose what she had kept hidden. Enrique, I always sensed your desire to embrace fatherhood. However, he started off with a more somber tone. It astonishes me that you have no recollection of our experiences prior to the divorce. Enrique stood still. He was somewhat perplexed by the meaning behind his words. What do you mean by that? He inquired, bewildered. Julia gazed at him for a moment, as though probing for the perfect words to express her thoughts. The embryos, Enrique, he finally stated with unsettling composure. Prior to our divorce, we made the choice to freeze embryos together. I recall our conversations about it, yet I never imagined you would overlook it. Julia's remark took him by surprise. Enrique found himself questioning the reality of what he had just heard. He gradually started to comprehend her words. Embryos? When did they come to that conclusion? What caused him to forget? What do you mean by that? He spoke, his voice trembling slightly as the fragments started to align in his thoughts. Why didn't you share any information about that with me? Julia regarded him with a weighty gaze, as though she had anticipated this very response. You were aware of it, Enrique. Following a few unsuccessful tries to start a family, we made the decision to proceed, but I kept it to myself, believing you would prefer to move on from it. The procedure took place in a clinic, and now his voice wavered slightly, as if the weight of his words was too heavy to bear. Now I observe you with your Arisa, and I'm left pondering what to make of it. Enrique was in disbelief at the words that reached his ears. Throughout that period, as his thoughts were consumed by countless matters, he had completely overlooked that detail. I had never thought that those embryos might have held a future. At this moment, he found himself at a pivotal junction, caught between the memories of what he had lost with Julia and the aspirations he held for the future with the Arisa. So those embryos. Could it be that they? He inquired, his voice trembling with incredulity. Are they in a state of suspension? Julia nodded with a serene demeanor, a faint, melancholic smile gracing her lips. Indeed, they are present. They were never destroyed, Enrique. I held on to them, just as we agreed. Now that you're about to become a father with Arisa, I can't help but ponder what might have unfolded if. Had we taken that step sooner? Enrique gazed at Julia, rendered speechless. His thoughts raced, desperately seeking clarity, a means to grasp the unfolding chaos. What could have caused him to forget? Why had I never thought about the potential of those embryos as a choice? I never considered that, he whispered, his voice trembling. I never imagined I would get another opportunity with. In the presence of embryos. Julia gazed at him, as if anticipating his conclusion, yet she was already aware that the weight of his words had surpassed her expectations. Years later, she re-entered his life, unveiling a truth that transformed his understanding of himself, his history, and what lay ahead. Perhaps you ought to consider that, Enrique, he finally remarked, as he rose from the table. I don't wish to intrude on your life, I merely believe it's important for you to have all the facts before taking such significant steps. Enrique observed her retreating figure, a wave of profound disorientation washing over him. Julia's words lingered, and as he struggled to comprehend them, a sense of entrapment enveloped him, caught between the realm of possibilities and the stark reality that now felt unavoidable. As she walked away, Enrique remained still, lost in thought, questioning whether he was truly prepared for fatherhood, if what he had long sought was genuinely within reach, or if a more intricate reality awaited him down the road. The weeks flew by, and Larissa's pregnancy was nearing its conclusion. Enrique felt a surge of excitement, yet the subtle doubts he had started to perceive in Larissa lingered in his thoughts, casting a shadow over his enthusiasm. He resolutely chose to dismiss them, firmly believing that they were merely a reflection of his own apprehension about impending fatherhood. The mirage lingered in his heart and mind, yet a part of him understood that reality was not as straightforward as it appeared. Marina, however, could no longer dismiss the growing uncertainty surrounding Larissa. He devoted time to delving into public records, seeking to uncover the truth about the young woman whom Enrique had so readily embraced in his life. A shiver coursed through him upon discovering Larissa and Ricardo's involvement in other fraudulent schemes. It was clear that action was necessary. He found it impossible to remain quiet, particularly as the doubts grew more tangible. On a Friday night, Marina reached a point where she knew she could no longer hold back. She possessed ample evidence, yet her curiosity compelled her to witness the unfolding events firsthand. He made the choice to pursue Larissa. He had been delving into the matter, and his informants revealed that during her excursions, Larissa frequently encountered Ricardo. Enrique was unaware, but Marina was convinced that the man Larissa had referred to repeatedly in their discussions was more than merely an old acquaintance. Marina stealthily approached the spot where Larissa once frequented. The venue was an unassuming bar nestled in the heart of the city, a spot where individuals mingled without drawing notice. The atmosphere was dim, accompanied by gentle melodies that deepened the sense of intrigue, transforming the space into a clandestine hub for dubious transactions. Marina stood at the street corner, her eyes scanning the surroundings, anticipating Larissa's arrival. The young woman soon appeared, her pace brisk, as though she were fleeing from an unseen threat. She made her way directly to the bar, with Marina trailing behind at a comfortable distance. The sight that unfolded before her was utterly breathtaking. In the dimly lit room, Ricardo sat patiently at a table tucked away in the far corner. The two exchanged a knowing glance and settled in together, oblivious to the world beyond their little bubble. Marina was in disbelief at what lay before her eyes. Larissa, who had envisioned herself as the future mother of his son, was collaborating with Ricardo, a man notorious for deceiving unsuspecting individuals. Larissa not only recognized him, but appeared to have faith in him. The smile exchanged in their greeting only confirmed what Marina had already suspected. Larissa was not with Enrique out of affection, nor for the existence he presented to her. She was engaged in yet another game, and he was merely a pawn in her strategy. Marina was restless. He rose from his seat and, without a second thought, made his way to the table where Larissa and Ricardo were engaged in conversation. As she drew near, their expressions shifted to one of astonishment, and Larissa attempted to mask her unease with a feigned grin. "What brings you here, Marina?" Larissa inquired, her anxiety evident. "Have you arrived at the incorrect location?" Marina was focused and direct, avoiding any unnecessary diversions. He walked up to the table and, with a confident tone, spoke. "I know I'm right, Larissa. I see what you're up to. I understand your company, and I'm aware of the underlying motives here. Larissa tightened in her seat, yet Ricardo, unfazed, wore a wry smile. Have you become overly entangled in Enrique's affairs, Marina? Ricardo remarked, his gaze fixed elsewhere. It may not be in your best interest to be aware of everything. Marina regarded them both with unwavering focus, her voice resolute. I realized I had arrived at a crossroads from which there was no turning back. No need to be concerned about Enrique, Ricardo. I've already delved into everything I needed to, Marina replied, her tone unmistakably assertive. I find myself here, armed with ample evidence that clearly indicates the fraudulent nature of their actions. If you continue to drag Enrique into this situation, I won't remain quiet. Larissa sprang to her feet with urgency. His complexion drained of color, yet his eyes sharpened with resolve in a heartbeat. What is it that you seek, Marina? Larissa said, striving to keep her voice steady despite the rising frustration. Are you really going to mess this up? If you keep pushing me, I'm going to leave this place. I will not proceed with this agreement if the harassment continues. Ricardo rose from his seat, casting a bold glance at Marina. You have no idea who you're dealing with, Marina, he said, his voice low yet menacing. This goes beyond mere entertainment for you. Marina stood her ground, unyielding. I was certain I was heading in the right direction, and there was no way I would look back. He had crossed the line. I have no interest in your choices, Larissa, Marina replied, her voice icy, but your actions impact more than just yourself, they also involve Enrique. And I refuse to allow you to toy with him. Larissa, clearly annoyed, advanced a step closer to Marina. That's enough, Larissa declared, lifting her hand with authority. If you persist in this manner, you will not only forfeit my trust, but you will also lose everything you believe you possess. Marina remained still, her eyes locked on Larissa, whose anger appeared to reach new heights. Ricardo observed her in silence, yet Marina was acutely aware that the circumstances had spiraled beyond her grasp. Larissa held the upper hand, yet she was determined not to let her slip through her fingers. I believe it's time for all of this to come to a close, Marina stated, then turned and began to make her way toward the exit. This is your final opportunity to make the right choice, Larissa. Should you choose to persist in your games with Enrique, I can guarantee that the consequences will not be to your liking. Marina exited the bar, departing from Larissa and Ricardo, who remained at the table. Yet, in the face of looming threats and palpable tension, he understood that retreat was no longer an option, he had journeyed too far to turn back now. The truth was starting to emerge, and even though she understood the repercussions would be severe, she felt compelled to speak up. Enrique sought the truth, and she was determined to do whatever it took to ensure he was no longer a pawn in this perilous game. The arrival of the baby was, undeniably, the most awaited moment of Enrique's life. All that had transpired, the tough choices, the pressures, everything appeared to culminate in that very instant. The hospital enveloped her completely, and upon seeing her son for the first time, his tiny hand lifted and his eyes gently shut, all her pain and uncertainties vanished. In the midst of the darkness that surrounded his connection with Larissa, he found his thoughts consumed solely by the small life that had now become his duty. He was completely engulfed by emotion. The moments leading up to the birth were filled with tension and worry, yet the instant she laid eyes on her son's face, she realized it had all been worthwhile. Larissa, while appearing a bit aloof, nonetheless radiated a sense of contentment at the arrival of her baby. She reclined on the hospital bed, weary yet satisfied, allowing Enrique to savor that initial bond with his son. It's perfect, Enrique said, his voice trembling with emotion as he gazed at the baby. We have truly achieved something remarkable, our son. Larissa smiled, yet it was a smile that lacked true joy. It was a hollow smile, one that revealed what Enrique was still unwilling to acknowledge, Larissa's emotional detachment. Yet, he was so overwhelmed with joy that he overlooked the minor details. This was his time to shine. Family and friends gathered at the hospital, and everything appeared to be in order. Enrique started to envision a promising future for his son, one brimming with possibilities, affection, and security. As the festivities unfolded around her, Marina observed with a wary eye, sensing an underlying tension that contradicted the joy of the moment. A sense of unease permeated the situation, an unsettling truth he found impossible to overlook. Ever since Marina had confronted Larissa, she had been vigilantly monitoring the unfolding situation. Though Enrique was enveloped in the joys of fatherhood, she understood that the situation was far from straightforward. He had a nagging feeling that there was more to Larissa's pregnancy than met the eye, and the fragments of truth were starting to align in a perilous manner. Unbeknownst to Enrique, Marina resolved to take action. He understood the importance of ensuring that everything was in order, that the baby truly belonged to him. Even with the happiness reflected in Enrique's gaze, she couldn't shake off the lingering darkness of the past, the deceit that Larissa had crafted. He took the initiative to request blood compatibility tests for the baby and Larissa without seeking his input. He kept it from Enrique, not wanting to stir any unease just yet, but a sense of distrust was steadily taking root within him. A few days later, the results arrived, and the report Marina received was far from what she had anticipated. The blood compatibility results showed some inconsistencies. Something felt off, an unsettling discrepancy that rendered the results concerning. The infant seemed to lack a consistent match with Larissa's blood group, prompting inquiries into paternity. Marina was engulfed by a wave of despair. She understood that remaining motionless was not an option. The anxiety that Enrique might be misled drove her to take action. He concluded that the most prudent course of action was to conduct a DNA test discreetly, without Enrique's awareness. Anticipation had reached its peak. If Larissa had engaged with him, she needed to uncover the truth before it slipped away. The following day, without a word to Enrique, Marina made her way to the analysis clinic. With the same resolve that had driven him to pursue Larissa before, he now made certain that the test was conducted in secrecy. She couldn't afford to let him intervene, nor could she bear the thought of him being even more heartbroken if the reality were revealed. In the days that ensued, Enrique kept reveling in the joy of his son's arrival. He reached out to everyone, shared photos, and displayed the beaming expression of a father who had waited an eternity. In his thoughts, all was flawless. The initial uncertainties I experienced have nearly vanished entirely. What could possibly go awry at this point? Cradling his son, he felt an overwhelming sense of importance in that singular moment. Yet Marina remained lost in her thoughts, and each time she encountered Larissa, her lingering distrust continued to haunt her. I couldn't help but observe a certain quality in the young mother's demeanor. Her avoidance of physical contact with Enrique, the absence of authentic emotion regarding the baby, all of it was starting to ignite the doubts she had harbored within her from the very start. One morning, as Enrique attended a work meeting, Marina made her way to his house. Larissa found herself in the quiet of the apartment, tending to the needs of the baby. The young mother appeared more composed, yet the disconnection with her son remained apparent. Upon catching sight of Larissa, Marina felt an irresistible urge to voice her thoughts. "Larissa, why do you never share your true feelings about the baby?" Marina inquired directly, noticing the detached manner in which Larissa cradled the baby. Larissa glanced upward, taken aback by the inquiry, yet displayed no signs of unease. "What do you mean?" "I'm looking after the baby. What else do you want?" He responded with a subtle grimace that fell short of a smile. Marina stepped a bit closer, her gaze fixed on the young woman. "It appears to me that you are not as invested in all of this as Enrique believes," she said, her tone serious. "Do you not care about the baby, or is it merely the money that concerns you?" Larissa's body tightened, yet she fought to keep her calm. "You have no right to speak to me that way, Marina," he said, his voice low and edged with menace. "Everything I'm doing is for the baby, can't you see? But if you keep pressuring me, I won't stick around." Marina observed her in silence, her response delayed. I sensed that Larissa was guarding something, though its nature eluded me. Her demeanor and replies hinted at a lack of full honesty. "He can't remain here." She can't remain quiet. I'm going to uncover the truth, Larissa, Marina finally declared, her gaze unwavering. I don't care what you do to shield your deception, the truth will emerge. Larissa, clearly anxious, met Marina's gaze before rising abruptly. Don't pursue this, Marina. If you keep pushing, I'll walk away. And if I go, it's goodbye to everything, he warned, the threat unmistakable in his tone. Marina observed her retreating figure as she made her way to another room. The atmosphere crackled with tension, yet he was resolute in not allowing Larissa to have her way. I was certain that the DNA test would complete the final piece of the puzzle. He was determined to uncover the truth, and nothing would deter him from his quest. Enrique, unaware of the unfolding events, embraced his joy. Yet Marina was aware that shadows loomed over her existence, and when the reality emerged, everything would change irrevocably. Marina's phone rang, and the sight of the number on the screen sent her heart into a frenzy. She had anticipated this moment for days, anxious about what the outcomes might reveal. His hand trembled slightly as he moved his finger to respond. Marina, the results are ready. The voice on the other end of the line was steady, yet carried a weight that deepened Marina's unease. So, he inquired, his voice a mere whisper, trepidation seeping in. He is not the father. The statement was unambiguous and sharp, striking Marina with a force that left her momentarily speechless. The stillness in Marina's room was palpable. She remained motionless, uncertain whether to voice her thoughts, respond, or merely absorb the words that had just reached her ears. The burden of the news weighed heavily upon her. Enrique was not the one who fathered the child. The deception that had unfolded before him for months ran far deeper than she could have ever envisioned. Are you certain the results are accurate? Marina inquired, striving to maintain her composure amid the turmoil swirling within her. The results are conclusive, the voice on the other end of the line stated flatly, as if the truth had already been laid bare and there was no space for uncertainty. Enrique is not the father of the baby. Marina ended the call abruptly, leaving no further explanation. Time appeared to freeze for a fleeting moment. He realized that there was no way to alter the reality of what he had just discovered. He understood the necessity of his actions, yet the thought of engaging with Enrique, of facing him with that agonizing reality, felt insufferable. After 2 days, Marina finally made the decision to speak with him. In those times, she ensured that everything was meticulously arranged, that the evidence was beyond question, that there was no possibility for misunderstanding. Even with the proof he held, a profound sorrow washed over him for the actions he was about to take. Enrique was not worthy of this fate. At last, he mustered his bravery and made his way toward his home. She understood the necessity of confronting him, realizing that she could no longer conceal the truth, even if it risked shattering the remnants of his trust. He knocked on the door, and as Enrique opened it, the same joyful expression that had graced his face throughout Larissa's pregnancy was unmistakably present. Enrique, we need to have a conversation. Marina's voice carried a weight of seriousness that took her by surprise. Enrique's expression darkened, visibly surprised by Marina's manner of speaking. What's the subject matter? He inquired, his tone suggesting he was puzzled by Marina's somber demeanor. There's something I need to share with you that. Marina's pause lingered, stretching into an almost excruciating silence. I must speak out. Enrique observed her, sensing a stirring within him at the weight of Marina's words. A flicker of bewilderment and torment glimmered in his gaze, as though he were unready for the impending events. What's going on? His voice quivered just a bit. Is it concerning Larissa? Indeed. Marina inhaled deeply. There's a crucial piece of information you need to be aware of. With those words, Marina retrieved the envelope containing the DNA test results and passed it to Enrique. The quiet stretched between them as Enrique accepted the papers, his expression a mix of curiosity and concern. What is this? He inquired, unfolding the envelope, oblivious to the significance of what lay within. As he perused the results, his expression shifted from bewilderment to incredulity, and finally erupted into fury. Disbelief swiftly gave way to anguish, followed by an encroaching shadow of something far more sinister. What is that? What is the significance of this? His words stumbled as the weight of reality struck him like a freight train. Marina remained silent. Her silence spoke volumes to Enrique, revealing that all he had held dear, all his aspirations, were disintegrating before his very eyes. He was not the child's father. His thoughts surged forward, a frantic quest for clarity, yet none emerged. "This can't be happening," he murmured, disbelief lacing his voice as he absorbed the words before him. "I apologize, Enrique." Marina gazed at him with a touch of sorrow, her tone gentle yet resolute. "I understand it's challenging, but it's essential for you to grasp the reality." Enrique, grappling with the weight of the words he had just encountered, lifted his gaze to Marina, his eyes brimming with unspoken sorrow. "I felt utterly crushed, lost in a whirlwind of confusion, unsure of my thoughts or emotions. You deceived me." His words came out softly, as though he struggled to voice them clearly. "All that I have accomplished, all that I held to be true, was nothing but a deception." The anguish in his voice was unmistakable. Marina experienced a surge of empathy, yet she remained resolute. She realized that concealing the truth was no longer an option, she could no longer shield him. "Enrique, I deeply regret this," she said, her voice trembling with sorrow. "You have the right to the truth, even if it brings the deepest sorrow." Enrique let the papers slip from his grasp. His hands trembled slightly. The tears were near, but he held them back for now. Rage was starting to engulf him, and a fragment of his being resisted accepting it. He struggled to come to terms with the fact that he had been so gullible, so willing to believe in someone who had deceived him. Yet the evidence was unmistakable, and the deception could no longer remain concealed. "How could you betray me like this?" he exclaimed, his voice rising, laced with both anguish and exasperation. "What made you feel the need to deceive me?" At that moment, Larissa stepped into the room, likely drawn in by the tone of Enrique's voice. Upon witnessing the look on her face, he sensed that something was amiss. "Enrique," he said, stepping forward with care, attempting to ease the tension, "I apologize, I can't grasp what's going on. I'm bewildered, struggling to comprehend the reasons behind this unfolding event." Enrique gazed at her, yet the anguish within him was impossible to conceal any longer. Fury and anguish engulfed him, and he was done with hearing any further justifications, any more deceit. "Perplexed?" responded in a fractured tone. "What could possibly lead to your confusion? This is not a misunderstanding, Larissa. This is untrue, and you've concealed it from me all along." Larissa attempted to express herself, but he cut her off. "I can't bear to hear another word from you," he declared, his voice quaking with a mix of rage and despair. "You've deceived me all along, and now, everything is unraveling." The reality was unraveling Enrique. The vision he held of his existence, the family he had started to create, was disintegrating right before him. He experienced a profound sense of betrayal and humiliation, and beneath it all, a nagging guilt lingered for having placed his trust so freely. "This can't be happening," he whispered, almost as if the words were meant for his own ears alone, as he backed into the corner of the room, seeking a moment to grapple with the shocking revelation he had just stumbled upon. Larissa gazed at him, yet the solace she once found in his eyes had vanished. Enrique had once viewed her as the nurturing figure for his child, but now that perception had crumbled. What he had envisioned as his future, what he had considered his happiness, was crumbling, and as the anguish surrounded him, the fury persisted, overpowering all else. He withdrew into his thoughts, seeking to unravel the path that had led him to this point, yet clarity eluded him. My mind was consumed by a singular thought. He had lost it all. Enrique teetered on the brink of total breakdown. The anguish that surged through his chest was beyond words. The shocking truth of not being the father of his child shattered him entirely, and the profound sense of betrayal that surged within him left him questioning whether he could ever heal from such a wound. Every corner of his house echoed with the deception that Larissa had woven, and while his mind yearned to grasp the possibility of resolution, his heart understood that there was no way to reverse the course. Larissa occupied the living room, perched on the sofa, exuding a serene yet taut demeanor, as if every detail were meticulously orchestrated. Even amidst Enrique's inner turmoil, she viewed him merely as another pawn in her strategy, an instrument to be bent to her will. Yet, upon witnessing the look on Enrique's face and feeling the weight of the silence that enveloped them, a shift occurred. The facade was becoming increasingly difficult to maintain. In that instant, the door of the house swung open with a gentle creak, and the unmistakable sound of determined footsteps echoed through the space. Enrique sensed the presence of someone entering without needing to glance over. Ricardo had finally made his entrance, the figure who had lingered in the background all along. A phantom that had orchestrated events from the darkness now faced him, exuding the assurance of one who is aware of his triumph. Ricardo displayed his confidence openly. He approached them with a confident grin, as if the manipulation of Enrique and Larissa was merely a playful endeavor to him. He was determined to achieve his desires, resolute in the face of any obstacles that might arise. "Enrique, it's wonderful to see you," he said, a smile playing on his lips that revealed his delight. "I trust this message finds you in good spirits." Enrique regarded him with disdain. He was astonished that, after all that had transpired, Ricardo had the audacity to step into his home, as if nothing that had occurred mattered at all. Fury surged within him, yet logic continued to propel him forward. "I was unable to maintain my composure. I refused to grant them the satisfaction of witnessing its downfall." Even though he desired it, he understood that he could no longer allow this circumstance to overcome him. "What is it that you seek, Ricardo?" Enrique stated with conviction, though his anger simmered just beneath the surface. "What else could you possibly desire after all that you've accomplished?" Ricardo settled into his seat unceremoniously, adopting a casual demeanor, as though he were in the comfort of his own abode. Larissa rose to her feet, yet she refrained from moving closer, preserving a space that only heightened the palpable tension surrounding them. "I don't want you to misunderstand me, Enrique," Ricardo said, crossing his legs with an unsettling tranquility. "I'm simply here to finalize the agreement with finesse." Enrique furrowed his brow, struggling to grasp the point Ricardo was trying to make. Yet deep within, he sensed the looming burden of what lay ahead. "Are we ready to finalize the agreement?" Enrique repeated, as though the phrase grew increasingly ridiculous with every word that escaped his lips. "Do you believe what you've accomplished is a bargain? This is simply a fraudulent scheme. You've deceived me all along, and now you show up to suggest a deal, as if I would ever consider it." Ricardo remained unfazed by Enrique's words. His expression remained composed, nearly devoid of emotion, as though he were engaged in a corporate discussion rather than a dialogue steeped in treachery and disillusionment. "It's not a matter of what you can or cannot accept, Enrique," he replied with an unsettling tranquility. "It's about considering the needs of all involved. Larissa and I have a proposal for you. If you offer a substantial amount, both she and I can vanish without a trace. We are departing. And you will never have to encounter us again. Above all, this issue will remain out of the public eye. I hope this doesn't turn into a controversy." Enrique experienced a surge of anger coursing through him. It felt as though all his efforts, all his sacrifices, were reduced to nothing more than a mere transaction in their eyes. Now they were demanding payment to keep quiet about everything that had transpired. "What is that?" The words escaped his lips like a breath of astonishment, and then he vehemently continued, "Are you really going to demand money to make you go? Following everything that has transpired?" Ricardo wore a faint smile, seemingly relishing in the bewilderment and distress of Enrique. "Indeed, you made a valid point, Enrique. Given all that we have accomplished, this feels just. A small amount of cash and all issues are settled. Without controversy, everything is just fine. Life goes on for everyone. In your perspective, you remain the child's father, and both Larissa and I receive what we require." Enrique sprang to his feet, overwhelmed by a surge of rage that engulfed him. Every word from Ricardo drew him deeper into despair, yet it also propelled him toward an even sharper understanding. He had been a complete fool. This was a con from the very start. Larissa had not only betrayed him, but he had also twisted the circumstances with Ricardo's assistance. All had unfolded as a struggle for dominance and wealth, leaving him as the one who suffered. "I refuse to pay a single cent," Enrique declared, his voice quivering as he locked eyes with Ricardo. "I refuse to be swayed by your tactics any longer. This has been a deception from the start, and I will ensure you face the consequences for it." Ricardo's smile faded for a brief moment. He appeared to have foreseen Enrique's reaction, yet he was resolute in his decision not to backtrack. "I see it, Enrique," he remarked with a weary breath, as though he had anticipated the denial all along. "Let me share something important. Ignoring my proposal will only complicate matters for you. If you choose to let pride dictate your choices, that's your decision. Larissa and I are aware of more than you realize, and the consequences may not be to your liking." Enrique stood his ground, resolute in his choice. He refused to be part of this game any longer. Trust had eroded, he no longer believed in Larissa or Ricardo. Every action he had taken had led him into a trap he needed to escape. "Do you understand?" Enrique said, his eyes full of determination. "You and Larissa are not going to get out of their own. I will not pay a penny and I don't care what they say. I prefer to face all this, just to remain part of your damn plan." Ricardo looked at him with a mixture of respect and disdain. I knew Enrique was angry, but he also knew he was not going to give in. Even so, I couldn't stop smiling inside, because I knew I still had letters to play. This was just the beginning of the end of everything Enrique had known. "Well, Enrique, if that is your decision, then so," Ricardo said calmly, getting up from the chair with a relaxed gesture. "Just remember one thing. Things can get worse for you. And when you least wait for him, I and Larissa will not be here anymore." With those words, Ricardo turned around, walking towards the door with a firm step. While moving away, Enrique felt that everything he had believed was falling apart in front of him, and that the true battle was just beginning. What Ricardo said, he was not going to allow everything that had happened to become unpunished. The time had come to regain control of his life, and he was not going to allow Ricardo or anyone else to destroy him. The air in Larissa's apartment had become dense, loaded with resentment and frustration. The baby's sound crying in another room was the only constant company. While Larissa was looking at the void, with thoughts and emotions about to overflow, she couldn't believe how she had reached that point. His plan had failed. Not only did he not get Enrique's money, but now Ricardo, the man he had trusted, seemed to be ready to abandon her to his fate. Since Enrique refused to pay, things had crossed out for Larissa. He had lived in a bubble of dreams and fantasies, believing that with Enrique's money he could have the life he had always wanted. But now, without money, without support, and with a baby in his charge, everything he had left was the bitterness of a broken life. Ricardo, meanwhile, did not have the patience that Larissa needed. Frustration consumed him. For days, he had been looking for a solution, but Enrique had cut any blackmail legal attempt at the root. The idea of an easy future, full of wealth and power, was no longer an option. One day Ricardo arrived at Larissa's apartment with a tired expression. He sat at the table without saying any word, and Larissa, seeing it, knew that something had changed. The tension between them was palpable. There were no more jokes, or the talks with which they had entertained while they plot their plan. There was only anger and defeat. "I can't more, Larissa," Ricardo said suddenly, with a hardness that made her shock. "This is not working. I have no more time or want to continue here." Larissa was silent, unable to understand what he had just said. He looked at Ricardo, trying to decipher his face, but he was no longer interested in maintaining the security facade he had always shown. "What do you mean?" asked Larissa, his words full of uncertainty and despair. Ricardo ran a hand in his hair, frustrated. He knew he could no longer hide his anger. The days that passed together, trying to extort Enrique, they had left a bitter taste. It wasn't what I had imagined. I had confident too much that everything would be easy. What I mean is that I'm fed up, he replied with a low but firm tone of voice. Enrique did not pay. And you have been lying to me all this time. I can no longer continue here. I am wasting my time. Larissa got up from her seat and her face, usually so quiet, now showed signs of disbelief. I couldn't believe what Ricardo was saying. Are you going to leave me here, with the baby? His voice faltered at the end, as if the weight of reality had struck him with full force. Are you really going to abandon me in this? Ricardo didn't look her in the eye. His gaze was fixed on the table, as if trying to avoid confrontation. In the background I knew I couldn't stay. He had made many mistakes, but the latter, letting Larissa drag him into a scam, had cost him too much. I don't have another option, Larissa, he said bluntly. I am no longer the one that was before. What we did was a disaster, and I'm not going to live in your lies. Rabies seized Larissa. The way Ricardo treated her now, the way he left her alone, was unbearable. He had believed that together they could achieve it, but Ricardo was abandoning it when he needed it most. He couldn't afford it. You are a coward, he shouted, furious. You used me, you let me believe that you had a plan, and now when things get difficult, you leave. Ricardo looked at her finally, and her expression was a mixture of frustration and repentance. I knew I couldn't bear that life anymore. Easy money, the life he had dreamed of, no longer existed. Don't be wrong, Larissa. I have also been a victim here, he said, trying to calm his own discomfort. But enough is enough. I'm leaving, and I leave you everything. Do what you want with that. He got up from the chair and walked towards the door without looking back. Larissa was silent, looking at the door close behind him. His heart was beating strongly, and a sense of abandonment invaded her. During all this time, he had been so confident, so sure that Ricardo would be there to support her. But now, at the time I needed the most, he left her alone. Alone, with a baby, without money, without the luxury life he had dreamed. The baby's crying in the other room took her out of her shock state. He approached the crib, but when looking at him, a feeling of vacuum filled her completely. The child, so small and helpless, was not to blame for everything that had happened. She had brought him to the world in the hope that he could offer him something better, but now he only had despair. Days passed in which Larissa was isolated. Without Ricardo, without anyone's support, reality began to crush it. There was no money, there were no easy solutions. Everything he had imagined had vanished, like a bubble that exploded without prior notice. During the nights he stared at the roof, wondering how he had got there. He had never imagined that his life would be reduced to being alone, without being able to offer anything to his son, more than a life full of struggle. He had dreamed of luxuries, with a comfortable life, but the price of all that was much higher than he had thought. Now he had to face the consequences of his own decisions, and the weight of guilt was unbearable. The day Ricardo left, Larissa saw him leave from the apartment window. There were no more tears, just the feeling of having been completely abandoned. He took everything that had been his life in recent months. The promise of a better life, the hopes of a perfect family, the dream of a future full of luxuries. Now all that had vanished. Larissa sat on the couch, looking at her around her. The baby was still sleeping in his crib, oblivious to everything that was happening. Meanwhile, Larissa had to face the reality that she had lost everything. Without money, without help, and with an uncertain future ahead, he only had one thing left. Survive. But how? What could he do now, when everything had failed? At that time, Larissa realized that everything she had dreamed was nothing more than a broken illusion. The decline of her life had begun, and she was the only one who could decide if there was still something to save. But with every day that passed, the answer seemed to be increasingly clear. Nothing remained. Enrique was sitting on the edge of the bed, looking forward without really seeing anything. Rabies, pain, humiliation, continued to throb in their chest. He had trusted, he had believed in Larissa's promises, and everything had been a lie. Everything he had done, everything he had risked had been in vain. The images of the last days, the confrontations, the lies, the void that wrapped it, continued to hammer their mind. However, something inside told him that he should move on. He could not get caught in this abyss of despair. It was at that time when he received a text message. He was from Julia, her ex-wife. He had spent a lot of time since they talked seriously. During all this time, the memories of their relationship had been stored in a closed box in their mind. But now, something had opened it. Something had aroused the need to speak again. The message said he wanted to meet him, talk about something important. Although Enrique was not sure if he was ready for a conversation with her, something inside told her that he should go. I needed answers, and perhaps, this meeting could offer you some peace. So, without thinking more, he accepted the appointment and went to the coffee where they would find. When he arrived, he saw her sitting at a table in the background, with a cup of coffee in front of her, but with a distant look. His presence had not changed. Even over the years, I could still perceive the same calm that had always characterized it. He approached the table, and when she saw it, a little smile was drawn on her face, but it was not a cheerful smile, but rather one that carried the weight of the past. Enrique. He spoke softly, his voice barely above a whisper. You look good in what fits. Enrique managed a slight smile, though his eyes betrayed a deeper sadness. I tell you, Julia. How are you? I'm in a better place, honestly, she replied, her voice sincere yet tinged with an undeniable gravity. But there's something I've been contemplating, something you need to hear. Enrique studied her intently, his instincts alerting him that she was on the verge of revealing something significant. Though he couldn't pinpoint what it was, Julia's demeanor suggested that this conversation would mark a turning point in his life. He settled in front of her, and the silence that enveloped them was both comfortable and charged. What do you need to tell me? He finally inquired, a blend of intrigue and caution in his tone. Julia inhaled deeply, as if searching for the precise words. He glanced around before addressing Enrique again, as if bracing for a significant revelation. Before we divorced, we made a decision, he stated, his gaze fixed on hers. We decided to freeze embryos. I recall our extensive discussions about it, our desire to keep the option of parenthood open in the future, and I never destroyed the embryos, Enrique. Enrique fell silent, utterly taken aback by her revelation. He questioned whether he had truly heard her correctly, whether he had fully grasped her words. For a fleeting moment, time seemed to stand still. What could he possibly say while grappling with the weight of her statement? The embryos are. Is anyone there? Julia nodded, her gaze unwavering. Yes, they are frozen. In the clinic, after our divorce, I never destroyed them. I thought maybe, someday, if you wanted to be a father, you could use them. I never mentioned it before, because I assumed you didn't want to discuss it, but now that I see how deeply affected you are by Larissa, I believe what you need to know most is that there was always an option, and you didn't have to reach this point. Enrique couldn't believe what he was hearing. He had spent so much time thinking that his only path was through Larissa, that he had failed to recognize a decision he had made in the past that could have given him what he always desired, a son. The frozen embryos represented not just a lost possibility, but an option he had completely dismissed. Why didn't you tell me before? He asked, his voice trembling with a mix of astonishment and exasperation. Why didn't you let me know when I was entangled in all this with Larissa? Julia lowered her head, as if anticipating that question. He paused before replying, his tone taking on a gentler quality. I never brought it up because I assumed you had moved on, that you were no longer interested in having more children. Perhaps if I had spoken up earlier, the outcome might have changed. His voice quivered just a bit, as though each word carried a heavy weight. Reflecting on everything that has transpired, I believe it's important for you to understand that there was a potential path available to you. There was no need for such drastic choices. Enrique was absorbing all that he had expressed. The realization struck him deeply, yet it also offered a glimmer of optimism. The choice I had been seeking, the chance to embrace fatherhood, was already present, suspended in time, awaiting his decision. I never thought there could be an alternative, he said, his voice tinged with astonishment. I believed that if I desired a child, I needed to pursue this journey, the one taken by Larissa. Yet now I understand that, all along, that choice was available to me. Julia gazed at him intently, as if urging him to grasp the significance of his words. I believe you always understood, Enrique. There was always a choice. Now, after everything that has transpired, it seems your only task is to choose the path you wish to follow. Enrique nodded slowly, his mind racing with a flurry of thoughts. Everything shifted rapidly, yet simultaneously, a sense of clarity started to take shape in his mind. He realized that his life had irrevocably changed, yet he grasped that, in some manner, he could still piece it back together. He was free from the weight of despair and the falsehood that Larissa had woven. At this moment, I held the reins. At this moment, I finally had the power to make the choices I had long desired. Thank you, Julia, he said in a softer tone. I appreciate the chance you've provided me. I'm uncertain about my next steps with her, but it's time for me to reflect on what I truly desire for my future. Julia offered a subtle smile, her expression calm yet genuine. Whatever you choose, Enrique, make sure it's for your own sake, not for anyone else's. You hold the power now. Both remained quiet, as though the gravity of what had been uncovered had unlocked a fresh chapter in their existence. Enrique found himself at a crossroads, uncertain of the choice that lay ahead. Yet, for the first time in ages, a glimmer of hope illuminated the path forward, dispelling the shadows that had long obscured his vision of the future. He could embark on a fresh journey, charting a new course, and this time, he would proceed with the assurance that he possessed the answers he had long desired. Enrique awoke one morning with an unusual feeling. In such a brief span, an undeniable shift had occurred within. The anguish from Larissa's deception, and the torment from discovering he was not the father of the child who had once claimed him, lingered in his mind, yet they no longer drove his existence. A flicker of hope lingered, hinting at the chance to reshape his future. Marina and Julia had stood by him without hesitation, and he was deeply grateful to them. Without their influence, I would not have gained the perspective I have today. It was not just the disappointment he had endured, nor the shattered vision he held of his life, but rather a new chance, a chance to become the father he had always envisioned, albeit in a different manner. The conversation with Julia regarding frozen embryos had served as the catalyst that opened a door in her mind. I had believed that the sole path to achieving it lay with Larissa, but now I realized there was a far more genuine and authentic alternative all along. He was indifferent to the notion of having an heir. What I truly desired was to create something authentic, a family rooted in love and dedication, rather than wealth or deception. Marina, recognizing the resolve in Enrique's gaze, immediately chose to stand by him. He shared his insights and gently reminded him that, while the journey ahead would be challenging, the key was to make choices that would lead to his own happiness and that of those he cared about. Enrique, what you've experienced has left a mark on you, but it has also revealed what truly matters, Marina remarked one afternoon as they shared a coffee together. There are alternative routes to explore beyond the one you initially envisioned. A fresh start awaits you, one that brings a sense of wholeness and empowers you to seize the reins of your life. Enrique nodded, appreciative of his sentiments. In that moment, he understood that he had lost interest in being the man who sought an heir at any price. What I desired now was to become the person capable of creating a strong and authentic life, a family that would appreciate him for who he truly was, rather than for what he could provide. Weeks passed as Enrique contemplated his future choices. It was a challenging journey, yet he started to align more with his true desires. He made his way to the clinic he had previously visited with Julia to freeze the embryos and, without overthinking it, concluded that it was time to explore that option. That was not merely a step towards fatherhood, it was a leap towards something grander, a pledge to himself, to his well-being, and to the life he had always envisioned. In the meantime, Larissa found herself sinking deeper into a relentless despair. He found himself forsaken by Ricardo, who had dismissed the meager accomplishments they had shared, leaving him solitary, burdened by the heavy cloak of guilt draped across his shoulders. The life he had envisioned, filled with luxury and comfort, had vanished. The future he envisioned, built on deceit and control, had evaporated, leaving behind a stark and unforgiving reality. He settled into his modest apartment, gazing at the infant peacefully resting in the crib. The child, once envisioned as the key to a brighter future, now served as an unending reminder of his own missteps. He was devoid of funds, lacked Ricardo's backing, and the choices he had made in his life appeared to be beyond redemption. What led me to this point? He murmured softly as his fingers glided over the table's surface. The tears that had been held back for days finally began to flow. He found himself pondering whether everything had truly been worthwhile. Indeed, ultimately, the cost of its aspirations proved to be excessively steep. As she pondered her circumstances, Enrique began to embark on his own journey of change. He ultimately resolved that it would be his responsibility to nurture the life he had started to build. He wished for his days to be free from the shadows of deceit and control. He had come to realize that true happiness lay not in extravagant places or authority, but in authentic connections, in honesty and real affection. During a discussion with the clinic specialists, Enrique resolved to move forward. Utilize the embryos that he and Julia had preserved years earlier. The choice was far from easy, yet I felt it was the correct one. The moment had arrived to conclude a chapter, to move forward unencumbered by the past with Larissa. One afternoon, upon returning home after a visit to the clinic, he discovered a call for something lost. Her friend had remained a steadfast presence in her life since everything started to fall apart, and she believed that this support was essential to her journey of healing. "Indrique, how are things going?" Marina asked when she picked up, her gentle voice laced with curiosity and a hint of worry. "I'm fine, Marina," he replied, a timid smile creeping onto his face. "I have come to a conclusion. I'm finally going to pursue my true desires, the things I've always yearned for. I am prepared to embrace fatherhood, though not in the manner I had envisioned. I will utilize the embryos from the clinic." Marina found herself unable to suppress a smile. I realized that Enrique had discovered the tranquility he sought, and I felt joy for him. "That's incredible, Enrique. I always believed you would choose wisely," he said with genuine sincerity. "A bright future awaits you, and I have no doubt you will excel as a father." In that moment, Enrique realized that what lay behind him was no longer a history riddled with uncertainties and deceptions, but rather a horizon brimming with authentic opportunities. The events concerning Larissa were now irrelevant. What I discovered from all that was that genuine worth lies in heartfelt connections, in choices made with love and respect. As Larissa grappled with her solitude and choices, Enrique discovered the courage to begin anew. The journey to fatherhood he had envisioned was always within reach, and now he could finally perceive it with clarity. The choice to utilize embryos marked merely the beginning of an extensive journey toward a future that, while still unpredictable, appeared less daunting than before. Enrique had discovered the genuine journey, one that relied not on riches or influence, but on being truthful with himself and those around him. At that moment, I realized that the essence of it all was not just about bringing a child into the world, but about creating something authentic, something profound, something that belonged to him entirely, from start to finish. In that moment, Larissa found herself isolated, ensnared by the choices she had crafted. His future lay in uncertainty, defined by a misguided ambition, as the emptiness of unfulfilled dreams gradually consumed him. The cost of his errors was steep, and even though he attempted to push it from his mind, the reality still struck hard.